I'm Paul.
And I'm Kenny, and welcome to EWPK. Oh, you caught me drinking.
I all right. This is an intervention. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Paul.
Same. Well, this is actually kind of cool. We get to do a do-over here,
I know.
but
We've
we
got
get to do it in a way that's kind of a little more comfortable, I think, than the
yeah.
situation we got last time. We won't give it away what that even means now, but we'll get to it eventually. So
That's in our after show.
we can have an after party too.
The dirt that really happens in producing the show.
I you know what? I have to tell you something. I love doing the show with you. I'm also glad to be home.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
just glad to be home, sitting in. I mean, this is a studio. Needless to say, I don't spend most of my day in here. That would
Yeah.
look a little. I have to. This is just like, oh, I'm really in New York. See, look at the picture in the back, right? I have to be in New York. So, but it's nice to be at this location and just hanging around and doing
Yeah.
stuff. And of course,
Yes. I mean,
so
CCE was wonderful, right? We were at Ray Wong's event, which is always fantastical, amazing, and it
you,
was certainly great to spend time with you personally and share the same air and hang out. But I know how it feels to be at home. In fact, it's great that you have that feeling.
what did you think? What did you think of CCE actually? Was the
You
deal?
know what? I thought it was. I mean, I always think it's very good, and but this year I actually really enjoyed even more than usual the people that were there and the conversations that were happening. Obviously, in a lot of conferences, what happens outside of the actual presentations really to me are the most. That's where you make your connections and you get to spend time and you learn people who are incredibly passionate, and the people that Ray brings and his team brings and draws to this location is fantastic. And I think the days went very quickly, which is a good indication. I loved our presentation. I thought it was good. We had a good panel on stage. You did a great job moderating. Thought there are other really good panels as well.
John Reed actually wrote a post on a piece on the conference and mostly on the AI part, but he also indicated that our panel, where we said we weren't going to talk about AI, got probably the most cheers.
It did. For those of you who were not there, that there was not unlike a lot of conferences, AI finds its way into most of the conversations, but we made a special effort not to do that. And once Paul announced that, everyone cheered.
I know. I mean, look, the conversation around AI escalates all the time, and it's interesting. I did another show earlier today. I did my analyst show, Talking Headless, and I covered ServiceNow in particular. But the interesting thing that's catching my eye about AI now is that people are starting to finally hone in on doing it in I hate using this word just because it's so overused in our world, purposeful way.
Yeah.
Meaning it's about use cases. It's about industry specific things. It's about small, large language models or small language models, meaning they're starting to get specific about the use of the actual technology rather than how extraordinary it is that, it can lose a it can lose a case in court. right?
Well,
So
that's exactly kind of the evolution that NFTs were going as well. Like, oh, okay, we have these GIFs that were NFTs that cost a fortune and it was ridiculous, but there were actually starting to move down the path of real use cases, utility-based NFTs to provide an opportunity for people to explore exactly what, after the hype, what could really be done with these. And then, of course, we had Sam Bankman, SBF, and NFX, and all of that.
I always thought you were one of the few people who really got the important stuff around NFT, blockchain, and its uses in a practical sense. And because
Yeah.
me, I just thought I collected baseball cards. I can't put NFTs in my bike. I can't flip them. What good are they, right? So,
You can't put them in your bike.
remember that guy, the first $66 million on it?
Yeah.
Please. I just, I have to say, at least that guy has probably in the Guinness Book of World Records for the world's worst investment ever.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and at one point he was heralded. I mean, we were doing NFT ticketing, and there was real use case for that, especially with all the issues that Ticketmaster was dealing with. We never really got to get to fruition for a number of reasons. One is obviously the Web3 market, NFTs went away, and then also Ticketmaster's monopoly is and will continue to be just so incredibly strong. They went through all the Senate hearings, but at the end of the day, nothing has changed. Everything is exactly the same, regardless of what happened with Taylor Swift and all that.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. So
no, a lot of it's fascinating to me, but a lot of traditional things are coming back with a contemporary twist. Actually, is something like, for example, I'm noticing all of a sudden that people actually are thinking about going to movie theaters again, right? And they actually are starting to do it, like with Barbie and Oppenheimer in particular. But I'm watching way more TV than I should, but I am watching a lot of it, and I'm watching let's say original movies on, say, Netflix or wherever. But then I'm watching all the commercials that say only in theaters, which they don't say until is the rest of it, right? They leave that part out.
Yeah.
They wait 6 months and you'll see it on Netflix or wherever.
Yeah.
Or Disney Plus, really. And so, but what fascinates me is the absolute interest people have in going back and being in a place where other people are to jointly do something together that is at minimum entertaining, and sometimes, as I'm sure we'll be talking about, even more than that.
Find
So,
in their space.
I mean, are you seeing anything like that? To me, it's mostly anecdotal, but
I know. Well, look at the Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie, right? This is a classic example of people wanting to experience an event together, but part of it was also singing and dancing together. It's like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, when you go and people act out the actual movie and they sing. I think there's that aspect of people wanting to be together. I don't think that we're ever going to see the reliance of going to a movie theater to see movies in the way it was. I just don't see it going back. People have become so indoctrinated in the comfort and the ability to stream, the comfort of seeing it at home. Now that COVID, there's still now issues with COVID again. People again are like, well, I have a friend who just got COVID for the first time. He made it through all, but now he got hit pretty hard. So I think then being an experienced guy, I will tell you that there's some experiences that are nothing like the feeling of being fully immersed. Right now, we're going to see that Apple Vision Pro, the Quest. That's going to be a way to watch movies and to co-watch movies with others that would feel way more immersive than sitting in front even of a big screen TV on your.
So let me throw another question at you on this one, because this is something pretty near and dear to my heart generally anyway. Is it seems like one of the types of entertainment that escapes the not going to be the same, although it may be a reduction in attendance, it's possible, is Broadway. You can't, I mean, look, you can watch Hamilton or Come From Away on Disney Plus, and take my word for it, I watched both of them on Disney Plus and Hamilton in person and Come From Away 6 times in person, right? So 2 of my favorite musicals of all time, without any question. But there really is something different about being in a Broadway. It's not even like a vague relationship between actual theater and watching it on screen. So,
you know what? Yeah.
what do you think in terms of Broadway? Because that's just a different kind of.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. I mean, this goes back to when I was working with Cisco, and they had just released telepresence, and they had spatial sound, they have wraparound videos, they had the physical part of the desk that matched the counterpart of the rest of the desk. So it felt like you physically were sitting at the same, and yet no matter what, it did not feel that you were actually in the same room with them. And it's the same thing I feel about live performances. I just got back from New York. I saw 2 shows. A completely different experience than what I would consider relatively passive, which is the experience going into you, which is what happens in movie theaters. Now, what it is where you feel like you're sharing the same air of the people that are on stage, where things are live, which means every single performance is different. People are different. The reactions are different. The audience is different. There's a whole different sense of this moment of time where I think movies feels like time shifted. It can happen. It doesn't matter whether I watch it now or watch it in a week or whatever, but something about being physically present in a live performance, very similar with meeting with someone versus, meeting on Zoom. I think there is a difference. Now, I've talked to some quantum physicists and whatever. I said, is it because the molecules are different and everything is changing because other people, and they're like, that could be part of it, but it's more just that feeling of being live, like anything could happen. And you should just remind people of the name of that other play, because I don't think people maybe would have caught it because you said it so quickly. The one you saw 6 times.
Oh,
I've
Come
seen
From
it
Away.
also. Yeah.
Come From Away. Yeah, it's a play about the events in Gander, Newfoundland during 9/11, when the people of Newfoundland, Gander, took in 7,000 people who were kept out of American airspace, and it's a town of 9,000, right? And they did this for days, and they were up 24/7, and they fed them, and they gave them comfort, and they got them in touch with their families. And in the meantime, they were stuck in Gander, all these people. It was the New York Times, when they reviewed it, I remember when it came out, said it was right in the middle of COVID. It had been out for about a year and a half. And they said it was one of the things we needed, right? It's a very upbeat. Now, I'm married to a Newfoundlander, right? And I've been for 42 years. And I've been to Newfoundland 30 times. In fact, one of the main characters in the musical is my wife's mother's cousin, literally, right? I mean, not the actor, but the actual person she represents was so we have a relative in the play, right? So, in the musical. So, but the people of Newfoundland are genuinely the most warm, generous people I've ever met in my life. And the musical reflects it perfectly, and the music itself is incredible. Look, they're a member of the Broadway, I think it's called the $1 Million Club. It's basically musicals that have grossed $1 million a week over a period of time, right? They're one of the biggest hits in the history of Broadway, completely unexpected. So,
and I would say that not only is the music amazing, but the way they represent the plane and the seats, and like the actual experience design, similar to some other what was that big animal play? And anyway, the representation of these physical objects and people in them, I thought they did a brilliant job on that. And you could stream that, right? Because they made a movie.
Disney
right?
Plus actually has and it is the actual. It's a recording of the actual musical, not a
Right.
movie made about it or around it. And it's got the original cast in it too. So it's absolutely worth watching. So before we bring on our guests,
running out of alcohol. I'm
we
already
definitely need to talk about this, and then we'll bring on our guests to further this conversation. So I got a picture of what we're drinking, but why don't you start telling us what it is, man?
You know what? One of my favorite distillers is Oban whiskey. Although I have to admit, for years I pronounced it incorrectly, and I guess I'm not alone because they say that they're the #1 most mispronounced whiskey. They're a very small distiller, but even though it's pronounced Oban, it's pronounced Oban, not Oban. And the one that I'm drinking, I think you can see it, is the Distiller's Edition. And what is unique about this, it's very smooth, very caramely, but what's unique about it is it's double matured, and which means that it starts in one barrel and then shifted to another one, typically of different origins. And it's just a beautiful, I don't know if you can tell, but it's a beautiful color.
Nice glass.
And it's very smooth, and I highly recommend it. I don't know, maybe it's 120 or something, the bottle.
I learned something new. Oban. I'm one of those people who pronounce it Oban.
I know. I did forever, but I actually ran into someone who worked for them, and she told me it was Oban. Of course, I don't know. I didn't believe her. Like, why I wouldn't believe her, but I looked it up, and sure enough, like I would know more than she would. But
her name was Joyce Oban.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I'm drinking. What makes what I'm drinking most interesting is the actual distillery itself. It's called Compass Box. So this is Compass Box Spaniard. It's actually one of the lower end of their line. They have about, I'd say, 200 whiskeys that are all unique and experimental, and they run from about $60 all the way up to about $400 or $500, $600 maybe. Compass Box was banned by the Scotch Whisky Association for calling what they made Scotch whiskey, because Scotch Whisky Association decided that they didn't follow the exact rules of the mash being exactly this or exactly that or exactly this. And Compass Box basically said, well, pardon my French here, but F you, right? And just went ahead and produced it and said, in effect, okay, Scotch Whisky Association doesn't want to call it whiskey, but you can, right? And so they have been wildly successful and highly, highly experimental. And they do some of the most interesting experiments ever. This is one of their simpler ones. It's the Spaniard. Essentially, they call it that because these are Spanish wine cask matured whiskeys, right? So it's there's a combination of sherry, and I think it's also Rioja. So it's an odd combination, but at the same time, it works, and it's a pretty easy drinking. I wouldn't call this smooth. I call this kind of bigger than it should be, right? But it's very tasty, but it'll bite you a little bit here and there, and so you have to be careful in the finish and actually throughout. And it's one of those things that if you like it, you're going to like it, and you'll go to it a fair amount.
Yeah,
but you might not, right? So I enjoy it. I don't love it, but I do like it. And so right now, it's tasting great and biting.
How about a toast?
I am not joking. I literally toasted and hit my screen.
And the Oban is a goat, like the Oban 14, the Oban 18. I mean, they're just always one of my favorites. Like, I just know I will always like it. So I love exploring some of the ones that you have too, but sometimes it's nice to just go to the Callens too, right? For me, I'm not a peaty guy when it comes to whiskey. So
yeah, well, I like peat, but I can do with it or without it.
You do like peat, though.
Yeah, no, I'll yeah, another day. I'll maybe next show, which is
You're
the
more
end of this month. So I'll do something with Pete, Super Petey.
Yeah, let's have Pete.
We
Let's
can
bring Pete on.
explain how Pete works a little bit too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All
and
right,
then
so
invite him onto the show, Pete. Okay.
Pete Alonso from the Mets.
Yeah.
So
Rose.
no, I'm a Yankees fan. Sorry. So why
So-
don't I don't know about you. I'm fortified and ready.
Yeah, yeah. Let's actually maybe like talk about
Well,
yeah.
let's wait. No, we should get over to we have to get over to the other studio before we can bring on our guests. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's always a little bit of an effort. Okay, let's do
Okay,
that.
so
I'll run.
Uber's waiting outside. All right.
Okay.
So
All right.
here we go. I'll see you in
Okay.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how we managed to build an exact replica of Studio One?
No, it's important. We believe in continuity. So
That's
even though
right,
we have
experience is continuous.
It just looks the same. I don't know why we always laugh at our own
because we're ridiculous. That's probably why.
Okay,
so
you
wanna give
me how many people do we have in the green room?
We got both.
Okay, fantastic. So look at we have a really special show, some special guests. We have two amazing visionaries that are going to join us in like the emerging tech world. And of both of them have made substantial contributions to the world in different ways. We're going to talk about one that has done a lot of work at LucasArts. You may have heard of George Lucas. She was executive in charge at ILM. She continues to focus on visionary journeying around storytelling and cutting edge technology. She's also a both of these individuals are tremendous people, which are, of course, critical criteria on who we bring on the show. The other woman who you will meet has done incredible work also in the emerging tech and has been an executive and in many large firms, one notable being the Chief Metaverse Officer of the infamous organization CAA that I have a great deal of respect for. And again, an incredible individual. Both of these we had the pleasure of joining on stage at CCE. Please, let's bring on Joanna Popper and Vicki Dobbs Beck.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
It sounds like there's something going on somewhere.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I don't know where it's coming from, but so Joanna, something like maybe crowd in the back or TV or something. I can't tell. Well, you're on mute, so but look, so why don't you each sort of give a little bit about your actual histories, because you both have genuinely extraordinary history, and I think the people listening would really want to hear what your life has been like. So, Vicki, why don't you start, and then Joanna follow up?
Sure. Well, I've actually been at Lucasfilm for 32 years. It's a company that has a lot of people who have been there a long time, and I think that says quite a bit about the culture and the people, which is really what keeps us there. But my journey has been one that's sort of zigged and zagged over the years. But when I first started at Lucasfilm, they started moving me around to the way they started new businesses is they just started doing them. And then they would bring me in and I would try to figure out whether it was actually sustainable. And if it was, develop a kind of a business plan and strategy. And as a part of that effort, I ended up in a group called LucasFilm Learning. It was a small group that was a part of the LucasArts Games group at the time. And we were doing interactive multimedia experiences for the education market. And so we sort of sat in the at the intersection of storytelling, high quality visuals and sound, and interactivity, and then overlaid with project-based learning lens. And it was a profound moment for me in my career. In fact, it really changed the course of my career because I really believed in the power of bringing all these different elements together and how much it could impact people who were participating in those experiences. And we were probably 3 decades ahead of our time. This was back in the days of computer-driven Laserdisc players, which preceded CD-ROM. So it really was a long time ago. But it was enough of a glimpse into what the potential future was that it stayed with me throughout the rest of my career. And I did a number of different things at Lucasfilm. I was in charge of a lot of strategic initiatives. One of those was in sort of about 2013, 2014. And it was really when the technology was finally catching up to a place where you could deliver the interactivity and the high quality visuals and sound because of the advancements in real-time graphics. So given we had an R&D group that had done some amazing work, and we decided to go ahead and open a studio, which was called at the time ILM X Lab, to create immersive storytelling experiences. And that was launched in 2015, and I've been running that ever since. And it has been a great journey. It's really trying to, pioneer and continue to innovate in storytelling. It's also challenging because I'm an entrepreneur inside of a very large company.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. So, okay, and then there's so many.
Joanna, let Joanna, why don't you tell a little bit of your history too?
Sure. Everyone, great to see you again. It's great to be at CC with you all. My background, well, most recently I was at CAA as the Chief Metaverse Officer. There's a bunch of beeps in the background. Are you hearing those things? Is that? Yeah, just keep going. Okay. So that's where I was most recently. Prior to that, I led VR go-to-market for HP, where we launched a number of really interesting headsets and computers focused on virtual reality, and also executive produced a number of VR and AR content experiences that went to Venice and Tribeca and South by one of the awards there. And before that, I was actually at Singularity University, living up in the Bay, leading media and marketing. And I was at NBC Universal, leading out marketing for one of the brands there. So for the last, and I have a whole other career before that, but for the last 15 or 20 years, I've been highly focused in the intersection of media and entertainment, and building programs and projects and content that drives creative storytelling in and around new innovative ways to build the content, to distribute the content, and to have audiences engaged with the imagination of the creators. And currently I'm working with a number of interesting AI companies. I've been on board of one company, working with a few others, and also working with some big Hollywood directors and producers around emerging technology. And I'm on the board of a number of companies.
So both of you obviously have like deep history in sounds. It always sounds funny when I say it, but it's so meaningful. It's like storytelling, right? I mean, but to me, that's how you communicate. Period. It's just how human beings get across to each other really well when they tell stories. And I've seen companies, for example, I remember SAP for a while at one point had a chief storyteller, was an actual title position as such. Now, did they do it well? Not particularly, but can you dig a little bit into just the concepts and ideas around storytelling, and a little bit on sort of I'll call it the practical side of it too, is because, some people are just very good at telling stories. But it's not a business environment story, so to speak. It's not something that's designed to hit necessarily masses of people. It's just, they happen to like narrative. Right. So can you fill everybody in on how this really does work and what's the thinking and why humans are like that to begin with? What is it about stories that matter so much?
Well, anybody that knows me has probably heard this quote before, but I often refer to a quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, where she said that there have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories. Huh. And so, stories are really as much a part of us and have been as life itself. So when there's new ways to tell stories, as were made possible by devices like virtual reality and augmented reality, we really felt like we needed to be there pioneering what was possible in storytelling using those new technologies. So when we founded ILMX Lab, the vision was pretty simple. It was just step inside our stories. And we wanted to invite our guests to be in worlds in ways that they'd never been able to be before. Now what we're doing is we've sort of refined that vision, and we're trying to transition from storytelling, which essentially is one-way communication, to this bigger idea of story living, where you're in a world making meaningful choices that drive the narrative forward. And I can later talk a little bit about what we think the key elements of that are, but I should turn it to Joanna.
Yeah, well, I would add to what Vicki said, and strongly agree with everything that she said, is that I see stories and as a way for us to connect with each other and for us to understand and interpret the world, our place within the world, and our relationship with others within the world. And so that's why storytelling or story living is so important, because it helps inform us about our own dreams and how big those dreams are, or how big or not. And it helps spark our imagination and reach for connection in the world and reach for others. And so, and when in traditional storytelling, as I said, it is a one-way conversation, but when you have interactivity brought into the types of stories, you then have the opportunity for audiences or users, or however you're referring to players, however you're referring to them in that specific, or guests, depending on which type of environment, they also get to have their own agency around where that story goes.
So is it like, when I think of maybe the range of engagement at the top, it might be absorptive behavior where the experience goes into you, down to immersive where you go into the experience. Does the difference, like, I'd like to just unpack this story living a little bit more. Is storytelling more of a passive experience? Maybe, Joanna, you suggested that, where you're telling someone and someone is just listening and hopefully engaging with that, versus story living, which is down further on the spectrum around more immersiveness, either possibly through technology or through
if you look at a lot of the storytelling mechanisms that we've had, whether that's radio or that's theater or that's television or film, it has largely, not entirely, but largely been something that has been produced professionally, and the audience, it's coming to the audience. Now with the advent of social media, even reality shows, I guess, where you get to vote on outcomes sometimes, but with social media, there's been more of or YouTube, there's been more of a two-way dialogue. With immersive experiences, it goes even further, even deeper, where the audience both gets to, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, becomes a character within the story. Other examples of that would be immersive theater, because the audience becomes a character within the story, and they actually impact or affect the outcome of what occurs. And so that's a whole new level and a whole new layer within the story living / telling that we're chatting about.
One of the first projects that really the first product that we shipped was Vader Immortal, which was a 3-part episodic story series. And when we started that project, we were like, I don't know, we were like a year and a half into development. And our plan was, and it kind of makes sense because we, remember we came from Lucasfilm, which was very much a filmmaking company. We started by imagining that you were sort of a ghost and that you were observing what was unfolding around you. And about a year and a half into it, we realized that we weren't taking advantage of the strengths of VR and working in real time, which was interactivity. So we pivoted and felt that you had to be the central character. And even though Vader was an incredibly powerful and iconic character, your unfolding relationship with Vader was really what was the key. And we, to prove to ourselves that we could actually achieve that in VR, we did a little test, which if anyone's done Vader Immortal, it's largely in the final product. But there's this moment where you're in a cell, like a prison cell, and the door opens in the distance, and you see Vader, and he walks to you, and it's the heavy breathing and the footfalls, and it's terrifying actually, because you also get a sense of how tall he is and how large he is, as a being. And he comes up, and at the time when we did the test, David S. Goyer, who was the executive producer on the project, had written some dialogue, and Vader delivered this dialogue. And it was so overwhelming in many regards that most people didn't even hear the dialogue. They just didn't, they couldn't take it all in. But also because we know where your gaze is, he could look you directly in the eyes. And that connection with with a digital character really convinced us that we were now on the right track. And we pivoted, and that became the approach to the series.
So given that at this stage, most people don't have, say, VR, I mean, I'm sure in a few years it'll become at least, a lot cheaper and then reasonably ubiquitous as far as it goes. So I want to step back, and you'll have to forgive me, Vicki, here, because I'm going to talk about Star Trek for a minute, right? So if I'm watching television, and I'm watching, I guess it must be Hulu, I can't remember. They have Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek, the cartoon, Lower Deck. All right. Now, they did, for example, this year, both shows seem to be highly experimental, and they're trying to be at least, I don't want to necessarily call it immersive, but at least let's say engaging to the limit of engagement possible on a two-dimensional screen. So, for example, Star Trek Discovery had an episode where the characters from Lower Deck got sucked into a time machine and ended up as human, in Star Trek Discovery. Next year, then, if you also remember, Star Trek Discovery had a musical, which was actually really funny. Next year, this is interesting, is Star Trek Lower Deck in the next season is apparently setting it up so that you drive the adventure, which I know they've experimented with and hasn't been all that successful, really, because it's usually pretty terrible storylines, and they're very delimited, and linear.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the attempts to kind of optimize or maximize is really more like a two-dimensional experience is going on, and it's something that's much more accessible than right now VR is to most people. So how do you, and I'd like to hear each of your answers, how do you bridge the gap? Because the conversation around VR and augmented reality is huge, and opportunity and potential is monumental. But how do you bridge that gap? Because ultimately there's a substantial gap in the two ideas, even though you want to relate them. How do you do that? Because a lot of people, they love those experiments. The reviews from everything from Rotten Tomatoes to individual viewers were enormously positive on both of them. So how do you bridge that gap? I don't have a clue how you do it.
There's lots of examples that have been met with varying levels of success, where you do have some level of interactivity within some sort of a more traditional story. A well-known example is Bandersnatch, and before that, Soderbergh did HBO or something like that, where you could watch the stories in any different order and choose. But in Bandersnatch, you specifically got to choose outcomes and drive storylines. So there have been examples within more traditional mediums. I would say that some examples that you can look to in another medium that also help point the direction are around gaming. And so if you look, gaming has interactivity built into it. And so, and there's narrative games where each individual player goes along the narrative, but also gets to impact their own gameplay. And whether it's really games that are more community oriented, like Fortnite type games or Roblox games, or games that are more first-person shooters or MMOs, there's examples within all of those. And then we've seen some of those games also spawn IP and that have now become film and television. So that's one. Those are two examples. One, an example of Bandersnatch, two, an example like a game or a Roblox environment, and then three, we're in an interesting precipice or interesting moment with AI, artificial intelligence, where there are we're getting to places where you can do text to video, text to 3D, text to insert and insert very easily, text to image, where I believe there will be some level of interactivity where we go and prompt the story that we then see, and it can be done within universes and within a brand safety way, like a Star Trek or Star Wars. Not saying you will, but but that you could create environments where communities can then create outcomes and stories using some tools, some of the newer emerging technology tools, and so you'll have an option to watch something that was created in from the director and from the professionals, or you can have an option to create something that you feel like creating tonight, and that's more of a user-generated content, more aligned to what's being created in places like TikTok and other social media platforms. And then, as you said, that those will the XR headsets will become more and more prevalent over time, and so a lot of those opportunities will end up converging.
One of the things that I'm really passionate about is cross-platform storytelling. The word transmedia was very popular many years ago. Then it became like verboten, it seemed, and now it's actually reemerging. But it is the idea of thinking of it as a well, we often call it like a mosaic of experiences. So each experience is like an individual tile. It has to be able to stand on its own. We should be designing, the right story for the right platform. But if you've designed it in a holistic way and you pull back, then you see a much richer and more complex design. So Paul, speaking to your, the thing about like a 2D screen, is there are interesting opportunities there. And Joanna was speaking to, for example, Bandersnatch, where you had an ability to make decisions. And we're definitely experimenting with how do you introduce a sense of agency into television, for example. It's going to almost by definition be relatively passive, versus VR, where it's, one of those plunge in. But the other important thing I think about all of this is that we have to provide different portals into a world. And, some are going to be more passive, some are going to be more game-like and, completely consuming. Some might be location-based, some will be home. All of those have value. And, the other thing is that in our case, in ILM Immersive, to date, I think all of our experiences have been curated. So you don't actually change the end, but what we're focusing on is making the journey feel unique to you. And we did an experience that was location based. And this was a way that actually people that don't own the headsets got to try it out. You go, you buy a ticket. And these were experiences that you did with like 3 other people. So it was groups of 4, and they called it hyper reality because not only were you completely immersed in the world because you had the headset on, but in the case of The Void, which was our partner on this, they created a physical, like when you reach out and touch a wall in the virtual world, there actually was a wall there, a physical wall, and that one-to-one mapping caused your brain to just completely buy into that reality. And then you enhance that with like heat or smells or rumbling. So it became a really, it's kind of what sometimes they call it like 4D experience. Right. And the experience was always the same, right? But when people got out, they talked about how they felt and what they experienced with these other people. So going through it again with new people, it felt new and fresh every time. And even though I think the story was really compelling, the way people described it was how did they feel in that story world?
Yeah, I mean, that is just fascinating. And the funny thing is that the world we live, the real world is incredibly immersive. I mean, we touch a wall, it's a wall. We have use of, we have way more than just the core senses. We have, like you said, the sense of heat, the sense of cold, the sense of vibration, all these sorts of senses that come to play in the real world because this is like the most immersive place. But the beauty about what you're saying is you're taking those same sorts of, like we always look at, how do we make the immersive world feel like real? Or even though that we might be able to enable different sorts of experiences that wouldn't be available in the real world, like flying or acceleration or moving or invisibility. But what you're talking about is taking some of these same senses that we experience in the real world that we already know that are core to us, but then applying them in different ways to provide different sorts of experiences. So at the end, that story is really theirs. That experience is really theirs, that only they own. Because as you start to get into smell, I don't know, Vicki, if you guys used a lot of the sense of smell, but sense and touch and all these things bring up connotations of your growing up, right? Of things when you were hurt, things that you felt strong. So you can bring all those things to bear, which gives people the ability to come out with their own experience and beautifully enable people to go through it over and over again. Because that's one of the things with location-based experiences, right? Is it going to be the same experience over and over? I did it once. Okay, great. It was fantastic. But will it be different? Will it occur differently to me at different times or with different people? So, I mean, I think that's fantastic. I'm so excited to see where this is going. Like this is just amazing. I mean, and even Joanna, you were, head of Metaverse for CAA, so they were thinking like of the future as well, in different aspects. And so CAA probably a little bit more of a traditional organization compared to like ILM or Disney. But even that's like really impressive that an organization like that can step into a new space and embrace it. I mean, regardless of where Metaverse ended up or not, just the ability for them to make a decision and willing to explore that, I think, is really impressive.
So, with all of that, so here's something that's always made me wonder a little bit too is, so we're dealing now with, so 25 years ago, when I was starting out doing all this stuff, I had this idea for a novel I wanted to write, and I'm a sports fanatic. So the idea was it was sort of a dark comedy. It was based on you could literally pay money to this company, and the company would basically allow you to play on any team in any season of any type of sport you wanted to, and it would be fully immersive. Hologramic, I guess, or holographic, or whatever it would be called, but it would be fully immersed in that. And the whole premise of the story was the guy starts seeing, for example, a world famous baseball star showing up at the crowd while he's playing basketball, and they had been part of 40 years before. So, and is he going crazy or something going wrong with the system? And what got to me about this was that I come forward and I think, well, that's not even a novel anymore, right? I mean, it's like it's basically a story of something that can happen. So I thought maybe I'll turn it into a script, right? I mean, I literally couldn't think. There's no point in writing a novel. It was at that point. It was like, who does that now? Who does who's not thinking about that? But here's the interesting part, because I had to think about the behavior of this individual too. One of the things that happens when we're dealing with entertainment, especially, is we're always thinking about expectations. So, for example, why did Seinfeld get slaughtered for the last episode, right? I mean, it was literally the worst possible ending, and it spent I forget how many years it actually existed as a show, but it was 7 years, let's say, leading to an end that didn't actually, and everyone expected it to be along the lines of, and it wasn't anywhere close to that. And it was horrible, and everybody like slaughtered the final episode because of that. And meaning there's a expectation that you have an expectation as to how something's going to end, right? And when it doesn't meet that expectation, you're angry, you're upset, something is wrong. And that said, if you're dealing with a very linear ending, it's either going to end that way or it's not. I mean, for a character getting killed off because the actor left the show, right? Rather than the character going to another job and it was your favorite character, right? I mean, all these different things. Now you're dealing with about 35 other dimensions and about 20 trillion other possibilities of branching in this. How do you deal with expectations in this? I mean, in that story, if you're immersed in that story, it actually can be traumatic if it doesn't end the way you hope it's going to end. Right. So I'm wondering how you even think about those things at this point, because there's so much more to it than it used to be.
I think one of the challenging things about branching stories, which is why we haven't gone down that path yet, is that some people will say that there is, if you have, 3 possible endings, that there's the best ending and then the other 2. And so I think that there is a real art to making branching experiences feel really compelling, regardless of which choice that you make. And when you're talking about expectations, going back to Vader Immortal for a minute, this was a brand new device. And there were this was probably the most iconic character in the Star Wars universe.
Yep.
And I realized how much faith they had to allow us to play with Vader in a very unproven format. And because there were tremendous expectations around anything that Star Wars, and especially anything that deals with Vader. So I'm happy because, it's continued to be one of the top selling Quest titles, even I think, it's 5 years later now. But it was scary. I can honestly say it requires a lot of courage to try to really pioneer around using IP that has so much fan engagement already.
It's interesting, Vicki, when you said about this this human trait of ours that if we pick one route and the other ones are not distinct enough, we start thinking, like, there's been a lot of studies where if there's 20 different kinds of mustards, you have a much better chance of being disappointed in the one you pick because there's so many others. Whereas if there was ketchup, mustard, or relish, it's so completely different. It's very clear. We don't have the capability as we're going through this experience to really define kind of a ketchup, mustard, relish so that we can be completely comfortable with where we end up and say that was the greatest for me. We're always like, well, maybe that could have been better, that one. So now I got to do that. So that's a really fascinating way of thinking about the challenges of that branching storytelling method that I hadn't really thought about. So I just have one final question for both of you. You guys are both like visionaries in defining new ways in which we engage with content, whether that be storytelling, story living, or whatever is next. What is it that excites you most? Forget about the constraints of either where you work or the experiences you've had, but when you look toward the next couple of years, and I'm not talking like be a futurist 20 years out, where we're going to have neuroplasticity and we'll already know what everyone's thinking. I'm just talking about where can we, and the viewers, where can we start to get excited about what's next? What's on the horizon in the next year or two? What gets you excited?
So there's a lot that gets me excited. I'm excited for hopefully Hollywood to get back to work. That's that's hopefully in the horizon soon. I'm excited. I think what excites me about these tools is, and a lot of what emerging tech provides, is the ability for more people to have access to them, and the ability for more people to be able to both have the means and the ability to create stories that others get to see, and the means and the ability to distribute those stories, and then for audiences to engage with them. And so I think for me, that's what much of this technology has brought, and has brought voices that weren't traditionally in the rooms or getting greenlit, to be able to tell their stories in exciting ways and bring important voices and important stories to larger and larger audiences. So for me, that's what I find most exciting and interesting about a lot of what we do in emerging technology. Just the accessibility that the tools provide.
Yep. Okay. Awesome.
And what that means, though, that also means that we are going to have more and more and more and more content, right? And so that there's also that doesn't take away from the traditional paths and methods that we've had. I think that some of that content will continue to rise up and distinguish itself as well, but that there's opportunities for more and more people.
Wow, fantastic. Vicki?
As a content maker, I'm really interested now in how you seamlessly blend the digital and real world so that the world becomes your storytelling canvas. And we've done some experimentation with very high fidelity AR in our world. And it's this idea of AR storytelling at city scale or world scale. And because we're doing off-device rendering, we get a lot. We get this very high quality imagery. We get shadows and reflections. So the digital elements are responding to the physical elements, and that there's little things that we don't really know. We just know when they're not there that it doesn't look right. But when they are there, it's magical. And so, sort of thinking about how do you kind of create a living layer that is designed to work seamlessly with the real world. I think that's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
That's amazing. And then you throw in AI and sentient and all that on top of kind of that's mixed reality. I mean, that's really, really cool. Well, we're excited. I think I can speak for Paul. We're excited about what both of you guys are going to do.
Yeah.
And what the next steps are.
I'm totally jealous. I really am. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I mean, it gets me excited just to hear not just what the future holds, but the fact that each of you know how to make it happen, right? Which is, wow. That's all I can say. If you don't mind, we will have you back. And actually, Kenny mentioned sentience at sort of the end there, right? Maybe to have a discussion a little bit around that too, sometime in the distant future.
Also, it's been announced that the actor strike is now over, so that is great news.
Oh, that's really great news.
That is fantastic.
It's been the deal ends in a historic deal strike. Tentative deal.
Look at
unanimous vote this afternoon. So
while
we were here.
We're breaking news.
That is wonderful.
Wow, terrific. I'm glad for everyone. I spent a lot of time, I'm part of the academy like Vicki, and I was at an event, and it's been rough for a lot of these folks, and so I know there's a lot of time that they got to make up, but it's so great that's ended. I really feel for them. So
yeah,
that's great news.
Yeah. All right, thanks,
Thank
guys.
you both.
We will see you again really soon.
Great to see you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow. I mean, I don't know. I think next time just have the two of them on and I'll just sit here and listen the whole time.
I know there's so much knowledge and vision and potential with those two. It's just humbling, I think.
It is, but it's so exciting. I mean, look, I'm 73. I mean, I have a few decades left, and hopefully I'm around to see some of this at least. I expect to be, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But but I mean, just what I've seen coming out of, say, LucasFilm and ILM and so on, and coming out of, even if the metaverse per se is no longer the big discussion, what came out of it is now part of the fabric. It's not a big separate thing anymore. It's just part of what's being done. And I just find that so exciting. And wow, that's all I can say. On the other hand, I still want to go to Broadway.
I know, me too. I don't think nothing's going to keep me away from Broadway. And I think that what's also amazing is that, and it's a little about what you and I talked about at the beginning of the show, is they also have the ability to actually put it into the world with use cases and reality. And I mean, I love what Vicki's talking about is, blending these different layers together and creating these sorts of experiences. I mean, the work, the possibility is so incredibly rich and rewarding, not only for entertainment, but in education, right? Or in, in the medical field. There's so many benefits of the work that they're doing being applied to different verticals.
Yep.
You know, I think Paul, I think I mentioned that I'm on the board of South by Southwest. So when I look at like these innovation boards that I judge, these are like the kind of people that are going to change the world, Vicki and Joanna. So really incredible to have them on the show, and I can't wait. I think we will have them back for sure.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Are you kidding? So for those of you who weren't able to actually watch the show tonight, there are going to be clips out there. And as always, I presume several thousand of you will watch those. I guess, you know what? Oh, actually, I had an idea I'll throw out to you right now while we're on air, just for a future show. Speaking of Broadway, I'd love to get my cousin, but he's a recluse, so I don't think that'll happen. But because he did win the Tony for.
He's fantastic. Yeah,
I know he's he's literally a seminal playwright.
You got to get him on.
I would love to, but he is very introverted. But he's also he's still my baby cousin too. So I'll say, look, I babysat for you for years. You should come on the show.
Tell them that it's just
however,
you, me, and him.
That would be fantastic. I love him. I just love him. And by the way, a kid who didn't like baseball, now a diehard Yankees fan. So another
you convert people.
My cousin. The other, but what I was thinking, Alan Berkson, Alan, of course,
sure.
Well-known advisor and thinker. His kids, Amanda and Olivia, are literally among the most talented singers, songwriters, libretto writers, producers, directors. They're kids. They're just starting out in their career. I think it's tonight, actually, I think it's tonight. It was either tonight or yesterday. They're doing they have their first musical that they created, produced, cast, etc. It's one night only on I think it's either on Broadway or right off Broadway. It's happening today. I'd like to get them on the show as our guest to talk about what it's like to start out in this unbelievable world of Broadway, which is, talk about magical. That's
you gotta do that, Paul.
I'm sure that, listen, these two kids, when they were little, I've known them since they were pretty much young, really young. And they are twins, right? And they sang together twice the national anthem at Citi Field, right? So they've got some chops. They're great voices, incredibly talented, total enthusiasts, and got a very proud daddy and mommy. So
that would be incredible.
I figured, what the hell? I'll talk to Alan and kids and see if they're up for it, and then we'll get it going.
Yeah,
I just thought I'd throw that out on air so that I'm locked and loaded and now have to do it.
Now you have to do it, and we've got some other really phenomenal people lined up. It's gonna be a great end of the year and
expect even more for 2024.
Yeah,
all kinds of big plans. And last but not least, I just want to announce in general, because it's the 15th anniversary of CRM Players next year, there will be a live event, probably I'm guessing early April, to guess still, in Atlanta, to celebrate the 15th anniversary and let's put it this way, Kenny, we're going to make it as experiential as humanly possible. Let's just.
All right. I'm in.
I don't actually know what that means at all, but I know it's going to happen. Listen, I've got a whole thing. We'll get into that offline. So with that, I guess that's it, really.
Yeah, I think it's a wrap. It's another great show with another incredible visionaries that are doing amazing and also phenomenal individuals that care about people and making the world better. So,
and it's a good way to continue the evening.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
So
I
I'll
myself
I'll
to
take us
more.
out of here.
Yeah, please do, Paul.